This is it, the end of the mountains. For about 1,000 miles, or at least until you hit the north woods of Minnesota, the land becomes mostly void of trees. The landscape begins to flatten out, and I'm now in a perpetual state of descent as I finally leave the Rocky Mountains. I love the mountains, I really do. The mountain air, the smell, the wonderful landscapes, and don't even get me started on all the great highways for motorcycling through. From now on, as it is with most of the Great Plains, all the great highways ahead of me will be running along rivers. Speaking of which, my next stop is along the Missouri River. If you remember from episode 53, the Missouri River was one of the main routes into the Montanan mines during the 19th century. To meet with it, I'll be dropping down and out of the mountains into the plains. This is where I'll be spending the next week or so as I make my way across Montana, North Dakota, and into the north woods of Minnesota. That's the plan, anyway. Contrary to what many people think, as boring as the flatlands may look, there will be a lot of things to do on the way back. Believe me, it'll be plenty eventful. An unexpected issue that I ran into was my helmet camera remote. It's been strapped to my handlebars for the whole trip and it seems to have died. The button on it would start and stop the recording function on my camera. A quick stop at a gas station, a borrowed screwdriver, and a new battery seemed to set me right. I unfortunately still have not noticed that my microphone is dead. As I've been crossing over Montana, I've noticed white metal crosses along the highways. The thin white metal crosses mark the sites where people have died along the highways of the state. The sight of them brings me back to South Dakota long ago when I saw something similar. I'm not sure how long you've been watching Two Wheels One Compass, but way back in Season 1, Episode 9, I'd come across similar signs that showed where automobile deaths had occurred. In South Dakota, these efforts were made by the state government of South Dakota itself. In Montana, they have a different origin. It all began on Labor Day of 1952 near Missoula. 6 people lost their lives in an accident over that weekend, and an American Legion member, Floyd Ehart, decided he would put up 6 white metal crosses at the site of the accident. From there, the idea began to spread. The American Legion is a war veterans organization that started after World War I. The organization has chapters in every state and U.S. territory, and chapters are further divided into what are called posts. The American Legion's political purpose is primarily lobbying on behalf of veterans and service members. They were the masterminds behind the GI Bill, and they fight on behalf of benefits for veterans such as healthcare and pensions. Anyway, Floyd Ehart was from the Hellgate Post number 27 of Missoula. Missoula was once called Hellgate, if you remember from episode 49. Those 6 crosses would end up being the first of many, as American Legion members all across Montana began propping them up all over the state. Not all of them, but a solid majority of American Legion chapters put up signs for automobile deaths around the state. There's no telling how many of them there are. And the sad part is, their function is to bring awareness to drunk driving, speeding, and other reckless behaviors on the road, but it's an uphill battle. Not many Montanans heed their warning. Montana is unfortunately the #1 state in the country when it comes to drunk driving deaths. According to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, a nonprofit anti-drunk driving advocacy group, Montana is ranked 50 out of all 50 states when it comes to passing legislation to prevent drunk driving, such as requiring ignition interlock laws or harsher sentences for first-time or repeat offenders. 45% of all fatalities on the road are due to drunk driving in Montana, the highest percentage of any other state, sharing the title with North Dakota. A lot of this is due to the spread-out rural natures of the states, along with the lack of public transportation or taxi services. The White Crosses are also partially funded by the state. The American Legion struck a deal with the state of Montana, and now all the posts the crosses stand on are made by the Montana Department of Transportation. The American Legion always asks the families of the deceased if they'd like a cross. Occasionally they do decline, and their wishes are always granted. Some monuments are so decorated you can barely see the cross. The Legion asks that the crosses themselves not be decorated, but it is okay to cover the posts. Now, I'm going to reveal something kind of crazy to you. Here in the middle of Montana's plains is one of the most inland ports in the world. I'm passing Fort Benton, Montana, one of the oldest cities in the West and the self-proclaimed birthplace of Montana. It was founded in 1846, a full generation before the Civil War. This was the Old West, where the only white residents having anything to do this far west of the Mississippi were fur traders. Fort Benton was the last fur trading post on the Missouri River. It was the head of navigation, or the furthest from the mouth of the river that you could get that ships could still navigate. At the time, it was the world's most inland port, and looking at it from above, it's incredible to think how far away from the ocean it is. All of the traffic that came from Memphis, Cleveland, St. Louis, New Orleans, they'd all end up here on their way to the mines of Montana. Eventually, the transcontinental railroads of the 19th century caused Fort Benton to fade. It lied upstream of a geological feature known as the Missouri Breaks. Somewhere amongst the breaks, I'll be finding my next place to spend the night before venturing ever eastward.